Hi everyone, Janie here. Welcome back to my garden. You guys, I have had the most productive day. I don't know if I just slept well last night or I don't know. It was just a really good day, and I woke up this morning and I thought, okay, I want to get some stuff done. So while I was drinking my coffee, I made a long list of all the things that I wanted to get done today. And honestly, I started this list even before I started filming. I was thinking I was going to get through some things and then film like a planting video or something like that. But halfway through my list, I finally just decided, why am I not filming this and bringing you all along with me for my productive day? So I decided to start filming, but even before I started, I had done so much. I had cleaned the kitchen, and when I say clean the kitchen, I mean like deep cleaned the kitchen. I cleaned the living room. I washed the bedding. I watered pots. I refilled the bird feeders. I put away some things that I had been meaning to put away. I took in some Goodwill. I cleaned out the metal workshop. Like, I had just gotten so much stuff done. And so then I wanted to work on this lime tree that had unfortunately died this year. I was so bummed about this lime tree dying because I really enjoyed it, and they were honestly the best limes ever. But it was kind of just time, and I've talked to other people who live around me, and they said that their lime trees sometimes will just up and die. So I'm trying not to give myself a hard time and trying not to blame this on myself. But what I wanted to do first, before I actually took down this lime tree, is I wanted to take all the leaves and the small branches off, because I had an idea of using the dead tree as kind of like a framework or a skeleton to hang bird feeders and bird houses and different things like that. You can see I have that one moss birdhouse hanging on there, and that was kind of my idea. So I figured before I called the arborist to get this tree removed, I would take off all the twigs, the branches, and the leaves and see how it looked just kind of there so that I could hang bird feeders and birdhouses on it. So I started doing this, and as I was doing it, I was sitting back and I was looking at it and thinking, I don't like it. I don't like how it looks. It kind of makes it look sad, and it kind of, I've seen it done before. I've seen this done before where people will hang things on dead trees or grow things on dead trees, and it looks really pretty. But for some reason, just looking at this lime tree just made me think of like death and dying in the garden. And so I just decided it was time to get it out. So I went and I grabbed my axe, and I don't know what I was thinking about doing this, but I decided I was going to take down the tree myself, because I had come this far and it's not that big of a tree. It's only maybe about 10 feet tall, and I could probably take it down myself and it wouldn't take too long. So I started chopping the tree down. I have to admit, I've never chopped a tree down before, but I did feel like George Washington chopping down the cherry tree, and it was kind of fun. But you guys, when I say this was exhausting, I mean, it was exhausting. My heart was beating. I was breathing heavy. I had to stop and I had to take breaks, and it was taking absolutely forever. But I was determined to do this myself now that I had started. So I kept going with chopping down the tree, and then I decided, okay, I was going to kind of work on this throughout the day so I had time to do other things as well and wouldn't completely tire myself out. The next thing that I had on my list was to deal with this area that I had in my center island where I had rudbeckia and verbena growing. Now, it was pretty hot today. It was high 80s, and you can see there's not a cloud in the sky. So I ran and I got this gardening umbrella that I had bought over the summer, and I don't know why I hadn't used it that much over the summer, because it is absolutely fantastic. The reason why I like this gardening umbrella is because it's really light, so it's easy to kind of move around with me as I'm moving. The one drawback about it being light is that the wind can knock it over, but it's so it's meant to be knocked over, if that makes sense. So it's really, really useful to have. So I apologize if you can't see very well with the shadow, but it was hot and it was very sunny today, so I definitely needed it. This verbena and rudbeckia were actually plants that I had planted the very first fall that we moved into this house in the zigzag planter. It was my fall planting. I loved it, and I didn't want to get rid of the plants, so I just transplanted them out here into the center island, and literally there was nothing here when I planted these plants in the center island. Absolutely nothing. So these guys have been in here the longest. Unfortunately, I did decide to remove the verbena because there was some clover weeds that had completely grown all throughout this verbena. And so I figured it was just easier just to take the whole thing out. And it really was. I could kind of roll it up and get all those clover weeds out. We have had a couple of days of rain, which has been so incredibly nice. It's kind of cleaned up everything, dusted everything off, rinsed everything off, but it also has started the weeds growing again. So I am on weed patrol right now and dealing with a lot of weeds, and you'll see I'm dealing with even more weeds later on in the day as well. So I ended up taking all of this verbena out, and then the Rudbeckia, which Rudbeckia is a short-lived perennial. So it'll just live a couple years, and I think this Rudbeckia that I had planted is pretty much on its last leg. So I started taking out a lot of it that I had looked like it was dying, but there was a couple spots that still looked nice, so I left them in just to appreciate them and appreciate that color there for the rest of the season. I absolutely love having Rudbeckia in this spot, and I think this is going to be the spot that I transplant all the Rudbeckia out of every single fall container I do. Like just yesterday, I planted Rudbeckia in my 2 gazebo pots, and when it's time to change those up, I'm going to transplant that Rudbeckia out into this spot because I really, really like it. It's front and center, and it's one of the first places you see when you drive into our property. So I really like having the Rudbeckia planted here. Now that my heart rate had come down a little bit, I went back to the lime tree and started chopping it for a little bit longer. Didn't last too long though. I immediately went on to more weeding for the Superbena raspberry that I have over here in the orchard garden. This was such a bummer because I was actually planning on leaving the Superbena raspberry here. I love the color of Superbena raspberry, but as you can see in this area, it's not blooming very well. And I think the reason why it's not blooming very well is it's completely taken over by Bermuda grass. Now, in this orchard garden, when we first moved in, there was like a lawn of Bermuda grass, and we had done the no-till method where we put cardboard down and then compost and then wood chips. And that worked, I would say, probably like 70 to 80%. It managed the weeds 70 to 80% of the way, but the rest of the way we have to pull weeds. And usually it's not too hard to pull weeds and stay on top of weeds. The problem is though, Superbena and verbena in general, it comes up from where you plant it and then it spreads out, like really far spreads out. And Bermuda grass has the opportunity to grow underneath it, and you don't notice it. You can't see it growing. And so it can get out of hand really, really quickly. And that's what happened here is it completely got out of hand and it completely took over this whole area. And it was just like the clover. I just felt like it would just be easier to completely take out the whole thing, remove all the Bermuda grass. Maybe I'll leave it blank and maybe like spray it or something while it's blank, and then replant something else next spring. So I was definitely bummed to have to take out this Superbena raspberry because, like I said, I wanted to leave it there because Superbena is actually not an annual for me in Zone 9B. It's a temperennial and it will overwinter very easily, but when it's completely inundated with Bermuda grass, there's kind of just no point. And back to more chopping. Now, would it have been easier to just have somebody come out and use a chainsaw to cut this tree down? Yeah, probably. Do I have blisters all over my hands? Am I exhausted right now? Later on today, it's been a couple hours since I finished this. Absolutely. Am I probably going to be sore tomorrow? Yep. But I still think it was worth it. I am still super proud of myself for tackling this tree, chopping down this tree. I've never chopped down a tree before, and now I can always look at the spot and remember I cut that down. While catching my breath from chopping down the tree, I noticed there was a bunch more Bermuda grass over here in this little corner garden area. Here I have Back in Black Sedum by Proven Winners, and I also have Helen von Stein Lamb's Ear. And then off to the right, you can see my Niagara Falls Panicum. Now, Bermuda grass it's a quick grower. It can take over pretty quickly, and it spreads by rhizomes and stolons. So, it can really get to be a problem. However, I do have to say it is quite easy to just grab a handful of it and just yank it out. And especially if you get a spot where it's all coming out of the ground, it's kind of really easy just to pull all of it out all at once. So yes, Bermuda grass is absolutely terrible, but it's nowhere near as bad as nutsedge. I talked about nutsedge in another video, I think last week. Nutsedge is the worst, because if you pull it and if you happen to leave the little bulb that's still in there, that it grows from, if you happen to leave the little bulb in the ground, it will spread and you'll get 2 and then you'll get 4 and then you'll get 8 and it'll just keep going and going and going. So nutsedge, I hate. Bermuda grass, I can handle. Next up for my productive day, I moved to the back garden by my greenhouse where I've planted my moon garden. And I have to say, my moon garden was absolutely gorgeous this year. I have Supertunia snowdrift, I have iceberg roses, I have diamond frost euphorbia, and I have this stratosphere white gara. And when the stratosphere white gara was in bloom, it was incredible. I was so excited about it. My plans for next year are actually to plant more of this gara around the greenhouse. So it almost looks like the greenhouse is sitting on a cloud. If you can imagine that, it's going to be so beautiful. Now, this is actually my very first year planting gara. I've never had gara in my garden before. And this year was definitely a learning year for me with gara. I did not know, for one thing, how much aphids would be attracted to gara. There are aphids absolutely all over these plants that I have back here. I didn't spray them at all. I probably should have, but now it was nice to see how much the aphids actually loved the gara. And so I think next year I'm going to be a little bit more prepared. It's kind of like Supertunia. When I first started planting Supertunia, I wasn't really good at it, and I had to figure out how to grow it and make it work for my garden. And now I can grow Supertunias in my sleep. I mean, honestly, they're a very easy plant to grow, but I do have to do some things to keep them looking good in my garden. One thing, I have to fertilize. I have to fertilize my Supertunias pretty much every single week because they're so florists. They have so many blooms. They need all that extra energy, right? The other thing I've learned over the years that I have to do with Supertunias to keep them looking good in my area is I have to use something called Bacillus thuringiensis, or BT, to keep the budworms at bay. And budworms are those white little butterflies you see flying around during the day. They will lay their eggs on Supertunias and calibrachoas and geraniums, and their worms will hatch, and then they will eat the buds off of all your plants, so they won't really bloom. So I learned those two things very, very quickly with Supertunias, and now I feel like this year I'm learning about gara. So the two things I have to say for gara is I'm gonna have to treat them for aphids. They just attract aphids way too much. I'm gonna have to do some treatment next year, so that's on my list. And then the other thing that I had no idea about gara is it's actually really good to cut them back. I have not cut these back that you can see here once this year. I cut the ones in my front garden back, but I never cut these back, and they definitely need it. And then I was doing a little bit of research on gara earlier this week, and it actually said that gara will continue blooming if you keep cutting it back throughout the season. So lesson learned for me. I'm sure a lot of you know this, but I just wanted to mention it. I'm going to be cutting my gara back next year when I plant more gara. The other thing that you might be noticing is that I'm cutting this gara back. I'm cutting it back by only about half, but I am cutting it back in the fall. And you have to be really, really careful about cutting gara back in the fall because you kind of want to leave the foliage on the plant during the fall, or I should say into the winter, because that foliage is going to protect the crown and kind of keep it warm over the cold season. Now, I still have about 2 more months until my first frost, so I'm not too worried about it. They're going to grow. I might even get some more blooms, and I'm only cutting them back by half, and I'm also on the very high end of their growing zone. Gara is, I think it's about 6 USDA hardiness zones 6 through 10. And so I'm totally fine here in zone 9B. So I am cutting my gara back in the fall, but if you live in cooler zones, I would not recommend cutting the gara back in the fall. I would wait until after your last frost or even like midsummer or something like that. But I'm not too worried about it because of where I live and because of how long we have until our first frost. And I know for next year, in addition to treating for aphids, I'm also going to be cutting it back regularly. All right, one last final push on this lime tree. I will admit I was so exhausted at this point. I had been working since early in the morning and it was getting to be later in the afternoon and I was so tired, you guys, but I would not stop. Yes, I might be a little stubborn, but I wanted to be the one that was going to be able to knock this tree over. Now, I was hurting. I had blisters all over my hands. I was really, really getting tired, but I started to notice that the tree was starting to wobble. You could see I'm pushing it with my foot there. And that gave me the energy I needed to finish off this tree. I was so close. So a couple more chops and then I was able to get in there and I was able to push the whole thing over. And I was so happy. I have never chopped down a tree before and now I can say I chopped down the tree. I wouldn't recommend it, honestly. It was a little too hard, but I am so happy that I was finally able to do that. Now it's time to go shopping for a new lime tree. Yes, I am going to be planting a new lime because having had this lime tree here, my family and I, we really got spoiled having fresh limes and I definitely want to have more fresh limes. So I will be going to buy a new lime tree, plant it. Fall is the best time for planting this lime tree for sure. But I just have to say I'm very proud of myself. I want to thank you all for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you have a chance to get in your garden today.